Rugby commentary, commentators, pundits. These are guys who can really add value to the game you're watching or be a really unwelcome distraction depending on how well or not they're doing their job. The reason I thought we'd have a quick chat about this one today is there's some speculation out of Australia that Sonny Bill Williams might be signed up to be some kind of pundit for Channel 9, who's getting the rights to rugby union over Australia. Also, I think they do rugby league as well, and he is a former rugby league player as well. So they see him, apparently, according to the news, as a potential candidate to maybe work across some punditry for both codes. I'm not sure about Sonny Bill, how he would go as a commentator. I can't picture it, but the guy's been good at virtually everything else he's put his hand to, so maybe. Give him a crack, see how he goes. But I thought, let's have a think about some commentators, pundits, who are particularly good or maybe otherwise. And you guys can let me know your thoughts. It's definitely not an exhaustive list. This is very much an off the top of my head list. And a couple of the guys whose names I didn't actually know, but I know their voice. I had a wee Google. But yeah, and I guess there's also a bit of a difference, like in the commentary team. I think Americans call it like the play-by-play and the color announcers. Like they got two different roles, right? I don't think they make such a distinction, at least over here in New Zealand. They called it like commentator and maybe like expert analyst or something like that. Analyst. Usually there's one guy calling the game as the game is being played, and then they will get expert comments from usually a former player, right? That's usually the way it goes. The play-by-play person is usually a broadcaster, usually not a former player. And then the pundits and the pundits in the studio, and then the person sitting next to the commentator, that's usually your former player. But sometimes you get former players who can do the play-by-play as well. But anyway, I'll start with a few names in no particular order. From South Africa, Matthew Pearce. He works for SuperSport. He covers a lot of their rugby, their internationals. I think he's their main guy at the moment. He does their Super Rugby as well. As a non-South African, I don't really feel a heck of a lot of bias for him. I know he's a big-time Springbok supporter, undoubtedly, being a South African rugby nut, but he knows the game pretty well, and he honestly works on his pronunciation really well, and I admire that. Like, you guys know I try to get the pronunciation right. I butcher it sometimes. People let me know in the comments, and that's the way I work on it. I'm not a professional commentator, and I put at least some effort into it. I feel some commentators do not give a rat's. He clearly does. When you hear him commentate on the French teams, he's got the pronunciation down to a T. Pacific Island names, he does them pretty well. Like, there's Georgians. Rugby's got a whole bunch of languages, like surnames and first names from a variety of cultures, which is a great thing about the game. And I think he gets it pretty well done. So I do like Matt Pearce. Andrew Cotter is one that I didn't know the name of, but I know his voice. He's a Scotsman. I think he's just a general like sports broadcaster over in the UK. I only really know him from his rugby, but he's never really struck me as offensive. I'm not sure if I love it, but am I indifferent? I like his commentary. He's all right. I never really get my, hairs on my neck standing up when he's commentating. I think he might have been the one that did those lockdown commentaries on really mundane stuff as well. It might have been him. If you're going back into the years, like historically, Keith Quinn, my childhood was spent with him commentating All Blacks games. If you've seen the New Zealand broadcast version of Jonah Lomu's break in the 95 World Cup against England, that's Keith Quinn commentating. He did get into a bit of hot water recently about kind of suggesting that, guys these days need to harden up and stop crying. I think after the Argentina game when they beat the All Blacks and there were some guys shedding some tears, and he's maybe showing his age a bit with that. And he does a lot of ads over here in New Zealand for like funeral insurance. It's showing his age. But yeah, so he's more of like the funeral insurance guy than rugby guy for some people, probably in their, I don't know, under 20 maybe. If they see him on TV, that's probably what they know him from. Sean Maloney. He's an Aussie guy. I think he played rugby up to about like maybe shoot shield level over in Australia. I don't think he got to Super Rugby level, not that I know of. But he works for World Rugby. He commentates sevens. He's quite funny, I think. He's pretty boisterous. Bit of a larger than life guy. You don't always need to be larger than life. Like some guys can really add that extra bit of like excitement into a dull game. He might be that kind of guy. I don't know. I quite like Sean Maloney. Don't mind him at all. He's better than some of the other Aussie commentators, that's for sure. Owen Nkumani. And I know he's not that popular with a lot of people. Owen Nkumani, like I mentioned, Matt Pearce has got good pronunciation. Owen Nkumani does not have good pronunciation at all. His is shockingly poor for quite a lot of names, but I think he's got a good sense of humour. He clearly loves the game of rugby. So he always makes me chuckle. Sometimes not in the best way when he's butchering names left, right and centre. I wish he would work on that. But yeah, I think he played up. Did he get a Springbok cap? Anyway, I know he played to a certain level anyway, but yeah, he's a guy. Who else have I got? Hugh Bladden, if you're speaking of other South African guys. Now, this guy's old school. Real old school. Calls the game real slow. Like, that puts some people off. Like, they want the kind of Sean Maloney, more adding excitement, especially to games which are a wee bit dull. And if the game is dull, Hugh Bladden's maybe not the guy, but he's got some pretty sharp one-liners, and he's like a real soothing old school voice. Maybe because I've also probably listened to him for many, many years. Yeah, quite a distinctive South African accent. So yeah, I don't mind him. I know, like Owen and Kamani, both those guys will rub some people up the wrong way. There will be guys on their kind of hate it list, but yeah, these are guys still on my kind of good side. Who else have I got? Gordon Bray. He's an Aussie commentator. I think he did all of the non-Fox Sports stuff from memory. He's not part of the normal Fox Sports commentary crew, which is probably a good thing because most of those guys are less than favourable, and I think most Australians would prefer non-kind of Fox Sports commentary teams. But yeah, what is his... He's got a famous one-liner that he always uses. I think Here We Go. Here We Go is his one. I think he was the guy who did the commentary for the Japan win over the Springboks. I think. Yeah, so he's a lively one and definitely a bit of a traditional dude. Speaking of the Fox Sports guys, Greg Clark. I think he's pretty much going to retire from the commentary game now, but he's been doing the Fox Sports stuff for years. All these guys I'm mentioning right now are all still your kind of play-by-play guys. These are the guys doing the majority of the game. His son's actually a player, and you wouldn't know it the way he commentates. He kind of keeps it pretty neutral, which is more than I can say for most of the Fox Sports commentary team. He also has a few lines that he uses maybe a bit too much. Like a penalty goes against the attacking team. That's one of the ones that he uses all the time if they, get turned over by, Richie McCaw or somebody like that. But yeah, I think he's pretty solid. I've mostly gone with Southern Hemisphere guys because honestly, growing up, these are guys that I've watched more of. I mentioned Andrew Cotter. He is Scottish. There's a guy. What's his name? Is it Ryle Nugent, the Irishman? He's the guy who I've become, especially since I've been watching a lot more Northern Hemisphere stuff. He seems to be like the voice for a lot of the Irish games, not just like the national team, but like I hear him commentate Leinster quite a lot. I think he clearly loves his, like maybe a bit like Matthew Pearce. He likes seeing the Irish teams do well, doesn't he? Like you can feel that in his commentary, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not totally one-eyed, but I can still feel it, which is maybe more than I can with some of the other guys who are maybe a bit more neutral. Grant Nisbet is another one of the New Zealand guys. Now he's one that sometimes grinds my gears a wee bit. I think he's worked on his pronunciation more than a lot of other guys, but there's some names that he's got funny pronunciations for that he shouldn't. Like the name Moore, right? like the actress Demi, that name. Like he always says it Mua. Mua. It's just more. It's just more. Just pretend one of the O's is not there, right? I mean, when Stephen Moore was captain of the Aussies, he would always Mua. Like just names like that. Like if it was a name which is different from his native language, I would have thought more likely to be a bit, pronounced in a less than 100% accurate way. But yeah, I don't know. Mua. Who else have I got? Bill McLaren, I think, is probably the greatest of all time. The late Bill McLaren. I think I first probably came across him playing John Lomu rugby back in the day. Some of those lines. Put him in Ward 4. That's a maternity ward. What was that? Digs like a demented mole with guys going into the rucks. And like before doing this video, I looked up just a quick clip on YouTube to see if there's anything I could find. There's a clip of him commentating on the All Blacks way back in the day. Vainga Tugamala is there, and he says he's from a family of 14, and you can see who was at the front or the head of the food queue. He's a what do you say? He's a big lad or something like that. Like that guy. Childhood memories. When I hear that guy's voice commentating, it's pretty special. Those guys are pretty much all play-by-play guys. Some of the guys who are there to like kind of add their, sorry for the Southern Hemisphere bias, like I said, most of these guys I'm familiar with from watching Super Rugby all my childhood and internationals down here. And these are the guys whose names I know. There's a lot of voices I would probably know from some of the Northern Hemisphere countries, but maybe not their names. Justin Marshall is one that will drive some people nuts. And to be honest, I don't actually mind him. I don't mind Justin Marshall. I figure with the guys who are there as like the expert or the color commentator, right? The guy who's there to give insights onto the tactics as a former player, or to mention like stories like I used to play with this guy, or I played against this guy, add some, kind of background, additional level information. I don't think he's too bad. There's sometimes when like the camera's really far zoomed in to like, I don't know, a halfback who's about to put the ball into the scrum. And Marshall's talking about the way that the back line is set up and he thinks what they're going to do. And sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong. I think more right than wrong. But you can't even see it on your TV screen because it's fixated, like it's so far zoomed in. But that kind of stuff I appreciate. Even if, sometimes his language lets him down a bit and sometimes he can be a bit one-eyed. I can forgive it as long as he's adding value to his commentary. George Gregan does a bit of comparing halfbacks. I don't think he adds a lot of value. Yeah, I don't get much from his commentary at all. He always seems a bit wooden and a bit stiff. Yeah, he's a bit of a letdown because I know, like, on the field, he was a real live wire and very vocal. I would have expected better from his kind of commentary. I would like him to, again, add more value in terms of tactical insights or things like that. Joel Stransky used to drive me up the wall because I felt like he's as one-eyed as it gets, but he's maybe grown on me a bit over the years, especially because I stay up or watch on demand like a lot more of the South African games than I used to. And, I don't just watch New Zealand teams, I watch the South African teams play each other. And, yeah, he's kind of grown on me quite a lot. So I don't mind Joel Stransky's, tidbits of information and opinions. Austin Healey. Again, I mentioned like I don't know that many Northern Hemisphere guys when I hear their voices on the commentary. The only reason I know Austin Healey's voice now is because while watching, I think it was Champions Cup, I mentioned in one of my videos, like, man, that guy was really pissing me off on his broadcast. And people were like, that's Austin Healey. Bro, he's annoying. He's really annoying. And he was like that as a player as well, right? Annoying. He's just not so much adding value in terms of just saying what people should have done. Like, he knows everything and this is what they should have done. They messed it up because they didn't do this and he has all the answers. Just a bit of a know-it-all. Nah. Too arrogant, man. Doesn't sit well with me. You can certainly, say what they did and what other options they would have had and stuff like that, but just the way it comes across just seems real smarmy, and I'm not a fan. One other guy who's a sideline guy is often over here in New Zealand is Ian Smith. And it's a bit of a weird one because he's a former New Zealand cricketer, but somehow he got a deal with Sky Sport over here in New Zealand. He does the rugby as well. He does the sideline pitch report stuff in the rugby. And he does full-time cricket commentary, at least when New Zealand's cricket was on Sky. It's no longer gone to another broadcaster, but he would pretty much spend the whole year doing commentary. Winter, he would do rugby. Summer, he would do cricket. And he just seemed to not watch that much rugby. Like, I remember prior to, it was either a Pumas or a Hawares game, he talked about, the Argentinian guys being really big scrummages and that's going to be their weapon. It's like, man, that's not been the case for quite some time. The team that he was talking about had really electric backs, but had really been struggling at scrum time. And it was just kind of like, you clearly just kind of seemingly, maybe not clearly, you seemingly just show up, do your bit, and then go home without maybe doing a bit of pre-research or watch the games of the teams that you're about to talk about. Like, as I said, if that's your job, I would feel like you put a bit more investment into it. You can kind of tell when guys are phoning it in, and that felt like a bit of a moment like that. But yeah. Rod K for Phil Kearns, those guys drive everybody up the wall. I think that's pretty universal. Just one-eyed, man. Like, and not even adding much value, just kind of being hot air is the main thing. In terms of pundits, the main two that came to mind, and it's obviously easier to complain about stuff than to give praise. But two guys that just drive me bonkers are John Kerwin. Again, just reeks of arrogance. He does a lot of good work with mental health stuff. He's been really open about his own mental health problems, and he's done really great work in New Zealand in that field. He's knighted. He's a Sir John Kerwin, for that reason, and I admire him for that. But man, he's another one who just comes across like a real know-it-all. And then the one against the Pumas recently, where the All Blacks lost, was just an example of him maybe not knowing as much as he thinks he knows. And he just talks over all his other pundits when they do a weekly show over here, and he's just, again, the loudest guy. Sometimes you need to be able to listen to what other people have got to say as well. And another Sir, man, Clive Woodward. Goodness me, that guy. He's another one. Maybe I just don't like know-it-alls, eh? Like, I'm always, personally, I try to be open and honest about when I'm not very knowledgeable about something. And I always think it's kind of like better to maybe say that you don't know as much as you do know, because then when you show what you know, people will be more pleased or impressed when you kind of exceed their expectations. Whereas if you just come across like, I know everything, sometimes it makes you look stupid. And Clive Woodward is just one of those guys who's, I have all the answers, I know everything, I won the World Cup. So yeah, still remember that Lions tour. But anyway, goodness me, I've gone on for almost 20 minutes about commentators. Like I said, this was literally me just scribbling down some names. And I did have to look up a couple of the voices that I know, but I didn't know the names of. But yeah, as I said, I think Bill McLaren is probably the greatest of all time. Very, very easy guy to listen to. I know Gazza has some way more strong opinions of mine. Don't get him started on Justin Marshall. He's not a fan. But do let me know some other guys, especially the ones I haven't mentioned, especially you guys from the Northern Hemisphere as well, because I'm sure there's these guys that I know their voices, but it was hard enough to find the guys if you don't know their name just by, Googling commentary teams and then finally finding that voice. So, do let me know some more. I'm sure I'll be able to kind of connect the names with the voices eventually, and that's only a good thing. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I will talk to you again soon. What do you reckon about Sonny Bill? Good commentator? Take care, guys. See ya.